Hi there. Here's our video for section 1.5, and this section is all about adding and subtracting real numbers. So it's a good review for us, dealing with some positives and negatives with adding and subtracting. Now make sure you write down this the objective or the goal in your goal sheet, or at the very least in the front of your notes. The goal is to find sums and differences of real numbers. All right. Sums having to do with addition, of course, and then differences are dealing with subtraction. So we're going to find sums and differences of real numbers. A couple keywords as you're writing that down. We have our absolute value. We'll talk about absolute value, what that is, and how we use it. Opposites and additive inverses, and those are both very close. You'll find out in a second. All right. So to start us off, we have this kind of a real life situation here. If you get into anything that has to do with business or financial planning or accounting, or lots of different business type jobs deal with doing records and keeping track of money and how much money you've spent, how much money you've gotten, how much money you have, and stuff like that. So if you look here, we'll read it through and we'll kind of just briefly talk about it. It says you've kept track of the activity on a gift card. So a lot of times we have gift cards that are reloadable now. So this kind of applies to that. It says the values are negative, or the red ones are negative when you spend money, and positive when you add money to this gift card. So the black ones are positive, adding to it. The red ones are negative, it means it's leaving. You want to give a friend the gift card. You want to give this card to a friend. How much money must you add to it to make sure that the card has $25 when you give it to her? And explain your reasoning. So what I'd like you to do right now is to figure that out on your own. Looking at what's over to the right. With the start, it looks like you started with $50. Yeah, you spent $19 on a new game. You spent $29 more on a new jacket. Then Aunt Sue added $25 to it for you. Then you spent $13 more on headphones. So your job is to figure out how much you need to add to the gift card to get it to $25. All right, you may go. Okay, so let's go through that together then. So if we have positive 50, positive 25. Now it's up to you how you want to do this. If you want to add the 50 and the 25 and then take away what all the other ones, or if you want to go in order 50, take away 19, take away 29, add 25, take away 13. I'm going to add the positives first. So we have 50 plus, 50 plus 25. That's $75. And the negatives, so this is going to be negatives. You're going to be losing 19. Plus 29 plus 13. And you can do that on your own if you'd like. 29, 19, 13. I'll do it like this. That's 18, 21. Carry the 2. 2, 4, 6, $61. So that would be 61. Now, if you're losing money, make sure you know that that would be taking away or adding a negative. It's going to be negative here, negative 61. Okay, when you add these together, 75 plus negative 61, you end up with 75 minus 61, so it's $14. You want to know how much you need to add to that to get to 25. Well, you'd have to add $11. So dealing with positives and negatives in the real world like this, this is why it's so important to be able to do adding and subtracting positives and negatives to with real numbers like this. All right, so let's start with the first method of adding or subtracting that you might have learned that I would suggest utilizing or picturing in your head, and that's a number line. So if I were to say, what is the sum of letter A there, use the number line. This is what I expect. I expect you to take a look at here and see where it starts. That first number is a 3. So that means it starts at 3. So I'm going to put my dot above 3 here. And then it says plus 5. So we're going to add 5. When you add a positive number to it, you take it to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is where you end up. So your answer then is 8. This is assuming we're going in that direction. Okay, so 5 plus 3 is 8. I'm guessing you knew that already. I want you to be able to use a number line though. Next one, 3 plus negative 5. So again, we're starting at 3. When you add a negative though, you go backwards. So you go to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You end up right there, and we're going in that direction, remember. So that, you end up with negative 2. Maybe you could tell that was going to be negative 2 right away as well. All right, let's try another one. Using number line, negative 3 plus 5. So start at negative 3 this time. And we're adding that positive 5. So we're going to go in this direction of 5. So we get right there. So our answer is 2 for that one. Okay, and then we've got one more. Negative 3. So we're starting at negative 3 again. Plus a negative 5. That means we're going that direction 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Stop it right there. Answer is negative 8. Alrighty, so that's method 1. You can use a number line. No shame in that. Oftentimes when I'm doing stuff in my head, I picture a number line in my head. Alright, so number line is the first method. Second method deals with this term called absolute value. Now, if you remember what absolute value is the distance a number is away from 0. Distance away from that origin. So a distance is always a positive number, so our absolute value is always going to be a positive number. Here, I'm going to actually move this down a little bit and make some space. We can do a couple examples with that. So move that down there. Move that down there. Move those down there. And move that down there. All right, so I'm going to change this so that it says always positive. Oops, that is weird. Oh, yes, I got it. Okay, so absolute value of something is always going to be positive. And let me give you some examples here. Let's say we have our numbers, we'll say 6, negative 4, negative 1, 2.5. And I want to figure out the absolute value. So the absolute value of these, how far away is 6 from 0? Well, it's 6 places away from 0. If you look at a number line here, 6 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 away from 0. So our absolute value there would be 6. Absolute value of negative 4, how far away from 0 is that? It's not negative 4 away from 0 because it's just a distance, so it's 1, 2, 3, 4 away from 0. Whoops. So that was a 4. How far is negative 1 from 0? The absolute value, that would be 1 away from 0. 2.5 is 2.5. Now, you'll notice it's always just a positive value of whatever number you're dealing with. So absolute value is always going to be positive. And we can use absolute value here to help you add or subtract. So I'll show you how to do that. So, first of all, here's some key concepts when we add real numbers. Adding numbers with the same sign. Okay, adding numbers with the same sign. That means they're either both positive or they're both negative. To add two numbers with the same sign, add their absolute values, and the sum has to be the same sign as the add-ins. So the sum has to be the same sign as the add-ins. So if you look right here, the absolute value of 3 and 4 would be 3 and 4, so you get 7. And since they're both positive, the answer is going to be positive. Now the second one, same signs again. We have negative 3 plus negative 4. Well, the absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 4 is 4. You add the two together, you get 7, but they're both negative, so you get negative 7. Okay, that's kind of how you do it with absolute value when you have the same sign. Now when you have different signs, it's a little different. So take note of this. Adding numbers with different signs. Meaning one is positive, one is negative. So to add two numbers with different signs, subtract their absolute values. So we're going to subtract their absolute values. The sum has the same sign as the addend with the greater absolute value. So what we're going to do here, if we have negative 3 and positive 4, we're adding these two together. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3, and the absolute value of positive 4 is 4. So the difference between those two is 1. And you take the same sign as the added with the greater value. So 4 is bigger, so it's going to be a positive 1. Now if you look here, it's negative 4 and positive 3, so 4 is bigger than 3. You take the difference between 4 and 3, it's going to be 1, and there's going to be a negative answer, so it's negative 1. Okay, this way might be tricky to you, might be confusing, but it will work if you understand this concept. So this is just using absolute value to find sums. So let's do each one. All right, so the absolute value of 12, so here's our absolute value. Would be 12 and 7. So the difference between 12 and 7 is 5. But since we have a negative with a bigger number, we have to have a negative answer. Okay, so negative 12 plus 7 is positive, or negative 5. Let's try the next one. Now we have two of the same signs. So if we look at the same signs up here, I'll use green to show it. Same signs, we look for the absolute value, combine them, and then, so this would be 18 plus 2 is 20. But since they're both negatives, the answer has to be negative. Okay? Alright, let's look at the next one. Okay, one has positive, one has negative, so we're going to go back to the blue where we decided that we'd find the difference between their absolute values. So we have 9.5 and 4.8. Find the difference between those, 9.5 and 4.8. We'll borrow one here. 4.7. So 4.7, if you look, the bigger number has a positive sign in front of it, so it's a positive 4.7. And one more. We've got some fractions here. So let's find a common denominator first. We talked about this, finding a common denominator between 4 and 6. I think it's going to be 12. So we'll have 12 as the denominator for both. They're different signs, so I'm keeping with the blue when we talked about adding with different signs. This is 9/12, and this would be negative 10/12, or in this case positive because we're looking at the absolute value. So the difference between those is 1/12. And the bigger one is actually this one, so it's a negative, and our answer is going to be a negative as well. So what I'd like you to do now on your own is to try to find the sum of each of these using what we just did. Or if you prefer to use a number line, you can use a number line for each one. Find one way, use either way to find the sum of each A, B, C, and D. Go ahead. Alright, so it's up to you if you want to pause it and take a look. I just magically made these all up here. But here's my work for each one. If they have the same sign, I followed the rules for this having the same sign. If they had different signs, I followed the rules for having different signs. So, for instance, for the first one, they had the same sign. So I found the absolute value of each. So we had 16 and 8. Added those together, got 24. And then wrote whatever sign it was in front of both of those. So they're both negative, so the answer is going to be negative. Okay? And again, this only works for addition. This stuff that we're doing right now only works for addition. The next slide will be some things about subtraction. We'll do one with different signs. Letter C, they have different signs. So I'll take the absolute value of this one minus the absolute value of that one. So it's 11 minus 9. And we got 2. But since the bigger one had a negative sign, the answer is a negative. So it's a negative 2. All right, so that's adding using absolute value. Now we've got a couple, the other two key terms here. First one is opposites. Opposites are two numbers that are the same distance from 0. So basically what I'm saying is if they have the same absolute value, but let's say for an example, you have 6 and negative 6. Same, they're both 6 spots away from 0. One is positive and one is negative. Now additive inverses, just the only thing to note about this is that opposites, if you add them, opposites add up to 0. If you add negative 6 and positive 6, you're going to get 0. Any time you add opposites, you will get 0. That's important to know. So we're going to use that now with subtraction a little bit. So here's the inverse property of addition. So let's just read it through and we'll see if we can figure it out. So it says for every real number A, so any real number, there's an additive inverse such that A plus negative A would be the same as negative A plus A, which would all be equal to 0. So here's some key examples. So the inverse property of addition says that 14 plus negative 14 is going to be 0, and you can flip it around to be the same thing. Basically saying that you have additive inverses. They're adding to 0. Okay, so anytime you have opposites, they'll add to 0. Here's the second key concept that I'd like you to take away from here. Subtracting real numbers. Now, whether you look at this or not, it says to subtract a real number, add its opposite. So note that this right here, subtraction, is the same as adding a negative. Okay? So for example here, 3 minus 5 would be the same as 3 plus negative 5. You can do that on a number line, or you can do it the method with absolute value, but you'll end up getting negative 2 for either way. Same thing with when you have two negatives. I want you to think of having two negatives and transforming it into one plus sign, because when you subtract a negative, you do add the opposite, so you make it addition and then make the opposite of that right there. So it is adding. It really is adding then. So our example shows us that 3 minus negative 5 is the same thing as 3 plus 5. Two negatives become a positive when they're right next to each other. And you get 8 there. So let's do some examples here. All right, so first of all, I want you to note that when you have two negatives next to each other, like this one right here, you add the opposite. So it would be negative 8 plus 13. Now it's up to you if you want to use a number line or if you want to use the absolute value method. Since I don't have a number line right now, I'm going to use the absolute value method. since they're opposite signs, you take the difference between 13, that's the absolute value of this one, and the absolute value of negative 8 is 8, so you subtract the two, and you get 5. And since the bigger one has a positive sign, our answer is going to be a positive 5. All right, next one. We got some decimals here. 3.5 minus 12.4. So that would be the same as adding the opposite. So 3.5 plus negative 12.4. Okay. Now it's up to you if you want to use a number line or not again. I'm going to do the same method that I just did. So I'm going to take the bigger one is 12.4. That's the absolute value. Take away the 3.5. And if you need to use a calculator or write it out, you can. For this one, I think you end up getting 8.9. So yeah, yep, I think that's 8.9. And you look at what's the bigger one had the negative sign. So we're gonna make this a negative answer. All right, and you got one or two more. 9 minus 9. Well, those are opposites. Look right here. Opposites add up to 0, so let's change that to addition so we know that it'll work. So that's 9 plus negative 9, and that is going to be equal to 0. Alright, one more. Try this one on your own. What is 4.8 minus a negative 8.7? Go ahead. At least start it out and rewrite it how it should be rewritten in addition. Alright, so make sure when you have two negatives next to each other, you change them both to positive. So you have 4.8 plus 8.7. And I'm going to do it off to the side here. 4.8, 8.7, 15 there. So carry the 1. You get 13.5. Both positive, so the answer is positive. Alright, and that is our little lesson on adding and subtracting positive and negative real numbers. So, just one recap closing question, and I would like you to answer this on your own. The question is, what do you do when you're subtracting a negative number? So the example there, 9 minus negative 10, what do you do? So I'd like you to answer this question in your own words. And we'll see you again sometime soon.